webinar that we are going to have today. Firstly, I would like to invite our Honorable Vice Chancellor to give the welcome address. He has been the encouraging force behind all our endeavors, and he has been our source of inspiration and a constant support in whatever attempts that we make to move forward. He has been the person who has been encouraging us throughout, and therefore I would like to request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor K.R.S. Sambasivarao, to kindly give the welcome address. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, all. It's my pleasure to be here for the very prestigious webinar by Professor Dean Current, which is a very pertinent topic to Mizoram. And the climate change is a very important factor in the whole country and whole world now, because global warming is increasing day by day. In many of the places in India and also abroad, there are so many problems which are being faced every year. The temperature is increasing and rainfall has been decreasing. And it was influencing on the crops productivity also in India and outside the India. And Mizoram is one of the places where we don't have that kind of drastic fluctuations, but it is one of the places where the protection of climatic conditions and also the forest area has been well protected by the government of Mizoram. And it was really well maintained. So we don't have that much deviation in climatic change, but even the global warming is also very less impact in this particular zone. Particularly whole Northeast India is well protected, and Mizoram is in particular, it is very well protected. But it is a very wonderful topic that because we have people from outside the Mizoram and also from different parts of the country, it will be a wonderful topic that people should understand why the global climate has been getting drastically changed and why the climate has got so much of influence by the global warming, and all these factors are actually been a very right topic for the present day. And we have a very authority and a wonderful personality and a great academician in this particular area who worked in various countries, and also who is also heading the department at Minnesota University, who will be very good academician and well knowledgeable person. It will be an opportunity for all of us to understand and also to know about the climate change and its influence in protecting the natural environment. We thank you very much, Professor Dean Current, and for accepting our invitation and blessing this particular webinar and enlightening all of us and also the participants from different parts of the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Now this webinar is the starting of a series of webinars on livelihoods and indigenous issues. The topic tonight is improving livelihoods and addressing climate change through community-based natural resources management, experiences from Guatemala and research opportunities for Northeast India. Tonight is the commencement of the series, and we are excited and happy to have a very... Pardon, sir?
You can take up Casey or John.
Sir, yes. I can hear her voice, sir.
Yeah, I can also hear, sir. Maybe yours. She's audible, sir.
Am I audible to all? Am I audible?
Yes.
You are audible to me. I don't know others.
Okay, so tonight we are very much happy to have in our midst Dr. Dean Current, an esteemed professor from the University of Minnesota, who is also the director of Center for Integrated Natural Resources Management and Agricultural Management. He has got his PhD in Natural Resources Economics and has over 40 years experience in Latin America, South and Southeast Asia, and the USA, working on issues related to sustainable management of agriculture and natural resources and associated livelihoods impacts. He has an experience in agriculture. He has his experiences in agriculture, agroforestry, natural and plantation forest management. He was also one of the signatory in the memorandum of understanding that was signed between University of Minnesota and Mizoram University. And the University of Minnesota and Mizoram University has been working on various areas, including research on integrated watershed management, gender, documenting and understanding current agricultural situations. He and his colleagues are expanding their works in the state of Nagaland also now. For the last 17 years, he has been working on markets and value chain analysis to identify sustainable agriculture and natural resources management opportunities that provide livelihoods and improvements for local communities. With these words, I welcome Dr. Dean Current to kindly go ahead, sir, with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ralti and Vice Chancellor Rao. It's really a pleasure to be here with you, and I want to thank the organizing committee for inviting me. I have good memories of Mizoram and want to get back there as soon as I can, as soon as we're able. But really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes, it's video.
Yes, sir, we can see.
Okay, so the topic I want to talk about today is improving livelihoods and addressing climate change through community-based natural resource management. And I'll talk about our experiences in Guatemala, but also a little bit about some of the work we've done in Mizoram and some of the opportunities I can see for working in Northeast India. And really, we do look forward to our continued collaboration. It's been a great experience so far. So what I'm going to present today, I'm going to start, I'll talk a little bit about our collaboration to give you an idea of how that's gone. Talk about community-based natural resource management and climate change. One of the reasons I've enjoyed working in Mizoram is because I do a lot of work with community-based natural resource management, and you have that and very old systems in Mizoram. And then provide the example of some of the work we've done with community concessions in Guatemala, and specifically our market-based approach to promoting greater conservation of our important resources, forest resources in that example, and combining that with improving livelihoods in rural areas and isolated forests there. Then I'll move on, talk about some of the research opportunities we see in Northeast India, acknowledgements, and then hope to have some time left over for questions and discussion at the end. Okay, so if we talk about the collaboration, really this collaboration started in 2011 when Chongtu Chong Nuna visited the University of Minnesota as a Fulbright scholar. He was from the PhD department and was interested in the water issues that we were having in Mizoram. And after returning to Mizoram, Chongtu invited a team of us to come to Mizoram, and we spent about 3 weeks traveling throughout Mizoram. We were very well received and really got to learn a lot about what was going on with things like PLUP, but kind of natural resource management in general. Provided a report to the government that was well received, and have continued that work. And as part of that, we became acquainted with the folks at Mizoram University and started that relationship at that point. Over the years since that 2013 visit, we've held several joint meetings. The first one was hosted by Mizoram University in 2014, looking at integrated land use management in the Eastern Himalayas. This was an international event. We had invitees from Vietnam, Nepal, different parts of South and Southeast Asia. That was followed in 2015 with another seminar in Minnesota on our campus here at the University of Minnesota, looking again at integrated land use management, but focusing on Mizoram in that event. And a couple of you, spent time with us here in Minnesota. John stayed on longer, but it was a good event, a good way to connect and show our colleagues there in Missouri some of the things we do in Minnesota. That was followed by about 6 of us participated in 2017 in the Natural Resources Management for Sustainable Development and Rural Livelihood Conference that was hosted by the Geography Department. And then our last event pre-COVID was 2019 symposium, again on integrated land use management, but with a focus on Nagaland as we've expanded our work to work with the folks in Nagaland. Out of this, there have been several books published, proceedings from these symposiums, and then our continued work together, and we have initiated some research. So we've done some work on farming, food systems research using the knowledge, attitudes, and practices methodology, including gender disaggregated task calendars, looking at how different folks in a farm family contribute. Did some initial value chain analyses of some promising options for Missouri. And again, many of the organizing committee participated in that research. Water resources monitoring and research, work closely with both the Department of Irrigation and Water Management at the state level and the Missouri University. John has done a lot of work on the DNA analysis of mushrooms, spent some time here with one of our professors at the University of Minnesota, and has done some groundbreaking work in Missouri since then. And we've had different capacity building events in Minnesota, Nagaland, Missouri, and other areas in Northeast India. And we also have a professor at the National University in Bangladesh, who's an expert in agroforestry, who's become part of our team. So I'm going to just talk briefly about community and indigenous-based natural resource management and climate change, some of the connections there, and the importance of the community natural resource management when we talk about climate change and mitigating the impacts of climate change. I think Vice Chancellor Rao's comments were very germane to this, that Missouri, a lot of the states in Northeast India have done a good job of protecting forest resources and their natural resources. So maybe the impact isn't as great, but those efforts are very important on a global scale. And so I think there are opportunities to look at that and how we can turn that wonderful resource that you have in Northeast India potentially into a source of income, livelihood support through things like carbon credits. So if we look at community forests around the world, and this is a report from Rights and Resources Initiative from 2014, about 1/8 of the world's forests are legally recognized as community forests. They have some sort of community management. Obviously, that differs from country to country, depending on local regulations and often, customs and culture. And those forests contain 37.7 billion tons of carbon, which they're storing, keeping out of the atmosphere. If that carbon that currently is stored in those forests were released, it would represent 29 times the annual carbon footprint of all the passenger vehicles in the world. So it's a significant resource. And again, if it were released, it would have a huge impact or large impact on climate change and our ability to mitigate the impacts of climate change. So again, it really points to the importance of these community managed forests on a global scale. This is another report that came out earlier this year on forest governance by indigenous and tribal peoples, primarily Latin America and the Caribbean. But I think a lot of the lessons from this report could probably be applied a lot of places in the world. And this was sponsored by Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. But they looked at this indigenous and tribal peoples governance as an opportunity for climate action. and a way to mitigate the impacts of the climate change that we do expect. Some of the findings from that report, one that community managed and tribal areas contain important forest resources. And again, it's large areas. Those forests are often better preserved for reasons related to culture, that these communities, these tribes, groups do have ways that they manage those forests, and they're very effective when they do that. Governance is another issue, location. Many of these areas are isolated, so they haven't had the same pressures as other forest areas, but those pressures are now coming to bear, that they're not as isolated as they used to be. There are people coming in interested in maybe converting some of those forests to an alternate use, whether it be agriculture, livestock production, or something else. So the pressures are increasing on those areas. They need to be protected and maintained. And the report also identified different measures for mitigating the climate impacts in indigenous and tribal areas, some of those being the effective collective territorial rights. And this is an ongoing struggle, I think, for a lot of indigenous tribal communities, ensuring that they have rights to manage their areas. Opportunity, looking at, as I mentioned, the compensation for the environmental services that are provided by those areas, climate mitigation, and water control, cleaning up the air. There's just a lot of services that are provided. And there are movements around the world to ensure that these communities that manage the resources are compensated in some way for those environmental services, which they often provide on a global scale, as we can see with climate change. Opportunities for community forest management. Forest resources are valuable and probably becoming more valuable. So if these communities can manage the forest, it provides a potential for generating employment and income for the communities, whether it be forest management for timber, non-timber forest products, water production, tourism, or the environmental services. Culture and traditional knowledges are important. These, again, because many of these communities have a long history of managing the forest and managing it well, that the whole cultural backdrop for that is important and really strengthens their ability to manage. And then finally, territorial governance and forms of organization. That these communities, they're old communities, they have well-established social structure, social cohesion. This often becomes very important as you see some of these changes coming about and looking for ways to work with communities to bring them together to improve land use management, and then also potentially form enterprises that can enter into agreements and be compensated for environmental services or products that come from their forest areas. So I think with that brief introduction, it's obvious that sustainable community or indigenous management of forests is very important for climate change mitigation and could be more important. But then we have to question, how can we facilitate that sustainable management? And so now I want to move into the case study. Again, we've been working in the Biosphere Reserve for about 20 years. And, as Dr. Ralty mentioned, about 17 years now looking at market-based approaches to conserving forest, improving livelihoods. The Maya Biosphere Reserve is in northern Guatemala. It's an area that was under government control, but as part of the peace accords in 1996, communities were allowed to request a forest concession. That was an area of forest that they could manage, and then harvest timber, non-timber forest products, as long as it was done sustainably. So it was really, on a global scale, an experiment in communal forest management and governance. They had not done this before. and it put the control in the hands of the peoples. And there was a lot of skepticism. They didn't think these communities could manage the forest. So to give you an idea of what we're talking about here, this is Guatemala, northern Guatemala. I guess it's a little bit down from that, but kind of nestled there between the Pacific and Caribbean Ocean, between North America and South America. And then kind of in the region, here's the Petén where we work, with Mexico on the north, Belize just to the east, and then Honduras on one side, Mexico on the other. So it's in that isthmus. And then looking at the map of Guatemala here, Petén is the northern part, and it's pretty obvious when you look at the map that it's an area that has low population. It's tropical forest, so it was the last area really to be colonized in Guatemala. The Pacific side is more amenable to human population, so that's where the population is concentrated. But because the Petén had been had the low population for many years, it's maintained large areas of forest, a little bit like we see in Northeast India, that are again important. So we work within the Maya Biosphere Reserve. This was a UNESCO declared Biosphere Reserve. It contains 83% of Guatemala's protected area. Again, very important biologically for biodiversity. It also has some of Guatemala's most significant Mayan sites, including Tikal and Yaksha. These were settlements of the Mayan civilization, which was a very advanced civilization until it kind of fell. But so there's that kind of introduces an element of tourism in this area, but also very much very important cultural site for Guatemala and the world, really. And after Amazon, it's the largest expanse of tropical forest in Latin America, and then especially when you include the surrounding countries, Mexico and Belize, which also have part of the reserve. So again, because of its location, the size of the area, it is very important, for it to be conserved and to provide, the climate benefits we're talking about. So this area, 40% of the Biosphere Reserve is designated as a multiple use zone. And that's dedicated to concessions, both industrial concessions and community concessions. And the multiple use zone basically is an area where they allow people to harvest products from timber, non-timber forest products, and place them in the market. There's an area of about 848,000 hectares, or just about at 2 million acres. Again, very large area, very important on a global scale. And the total area of the reserve is about 5 million acres. This is a map of the Maya Biosphere Reserve. And you can see here the areas that are kind of that light green, bright green, if you will, or lime. Those are the areas that are protected for strict conservation. Then if you go over to the right, these crosshatched areas with green and the brown, those are the concessions, both industrial and community concessions. There are 1.2 million acres of certified concessions, but the whole area is about 2 million acres. And then to the south, as you head towards the more populated parts of the country, you have a buffer zone, which is settled areas on the agricultural frontier. That's pretty degraded land. It's in agriculture and livestock production, but not very well managed. So there are efforts now ongoing with some of the folks that we work with in Guatemala to move into those areas, establish agroforestry systems, so those areas also become more sustainable as they also protect the main block of forest there. So community forest concessions in the Petén, again, these are large areas of forest, tens or hundreds of thousands of acres managed by communities for conservation, wood, and non-timber forest product production. This is just a picture of the president of Guatemala visited the site when we were there, and it's been, I think, on a global scale, recognized as a pretty important experiment and success in terms of managing forests and working with communities. So it is productive management of forest resources with social and environmental benefits. And some of those benefits obviously extend beyond Guatemala when we talk about climate change. So the concessions, as I mentioned, were granted by the Guatemalan government. The communities have to request them. It's a fairly detailed process for a community to request and then actually be granted a concession. Some have applied and not been able to get a concession. Some have received a concession, but because of poor management, it was taken away. But the majority of the concessions have been operating now for close to 25 years. So each concession is given a 25-year lease for natural resource extraction. So they can, under permits, under sustainable management plans, they extract timber and non-timber forest products and then place those in the market. There's recently been some concern because they are at the point where they're renewing those leases. There's a lot of people that would like to have access to that forest. But because they have performed well in meeting the objectives of the program to provide the concessions, conserving the forest, improving livelihoods, right now, I think 2 or 3 of the concessions have already begun the process of renewal, and they know they will be renewed. And again, they can harvest both timber and non-timber forest products. Initially, they worked primarily with timber, but now they work with non-timber forest products. That's where a lot of our work has been. But they have to have an approved sustainable management plan for resource extraction and transport. And this is governed by the Council of Natural Areas and Protected Areas in Guatemala. And again, it's a pretty rigorous process to get the permits and enter in and be able to extract and transport materials. They also are required to maintain for their timber operations the Forest Stewardship Council certification. If you're not familiar with the Forest Stewardship Council, it's probably the premier forest certification in the world that basically says that the timber that comes out of these forests is sustainably managed. And when we talk about sustainable management, that includes the biophysical, the social, and the economic issues that are important to the communities. So they've been able to maintain that now for 20 plus years. And we've been working there for the past 15 to 20 years on marketing sustainably harvested non-timber forest products. That's kind of where we work in. So I want to talk about one of those products now, and that is it's a palm. It's a palm that grows in the understory of the forest. It's called shate in the local dialect, or jade in the market. And it's gathered from natural areas. It's natural wild harvested, and then by the local communities, and then it's sent to both North America and Europe and used in the floral industry. And I'm going to talk specifically about one of the things I'll talk about is a program whereby we work with Christian congregations throughout the U.S. and they purchase this palm for their Palm Sunday services. And for every frond that's sold, 5 cents goes directly back to the community for them to use for what they decide they need. And I'll talk more about that as we move through this. But this is kind of our theory of change, if you will, as we work in Guatemala with the markets and the products, is that, when we have these forests, natural environments that we want to conserve, they have to represent a value to the local communities to be preserved. I mean, you can do it with guards, but that's not a very effective solution. And we've seen that around the world, that's not the best. If we can provide income to the communities, it's part of their livelihood, they're going to be more likely to conserve it. And then you don't need the guards, and you don't need to pay them and support them. So if we can add value, the forest communities are going to be more likely to conserve the forests and keep them into perpetuity. And so as we look at the non-timber forest products, our work really, it's developing those markets for the non-timber forest products to add value to the forest and therefore help preserve the forest. But there are always issues and the things that we do take into account and have to be aware of. So oftentimes, if you develop a market for a new product or probably an old product, but expand the demand, you often get overexploitation and unsustainable harvest. So again, that's something that has to be part of the equation, is doing the research that allows us to say, for these Chate palms, you can harvest 3 leaflet or 3 fronds every 3 months. Or every 3 years, whatever it might be, but you need that basic research done. Another thing that often happens is those non-timber forest products are taken out of the forest and cultivated under shade, oftentimes artificial shade, and that takes away the protection from the forest. This has happened with chicle, the gum base that's used for chewing gum in Guatemala. There was a boom of production of chicle, but then the companies came up with a synthetic substitute, and that took away that market. Or as we all hope, you can define sustainable harvest levels and then kind of get those products into the market and promote greater conservation and community development and livelihood improvement. So the eco palms, as we call them, or someone came up with that name, I can't remember who, but they're of the genus Commanderea that is traded in the world floral market. So it is an international market, which has some benefits. About 600 million fronds are sold annually. So it's not huge, but it's very significant. About 60 to 100 million US annual wholesale is generated from those sales. It's produced primarily in Guatemala and Mexico. That's the natural range of these palms. But traditionally it's been gathered from natural forest and then sold to middlemen, who then will sell the palms to an importer, in the US case, to an importer in Texas. So a lot of that left the local communities out of that whole process. These are the production areas. Here's Guatemala down here, Belize, and then on into Mexico. Pictures there's the Commanderea genus. There's several species. The one in the upper left-hand corner is jade, which is the palm we primarily work with churches. This is elegans, which has a smaller market, U.S. market, and then fishtail on the bottom right, which is sold to Europe. That's where most of the demand comes from for that. These palms, again, as I mentioned, they're wild harvested. Men do the gathering. They go out in the forest, gather them, and then by different means. In these pictures, they have them on their backs, but you might have a mule, a horse, taking the fronds out, pickup truck. It varies by location, but they're taken out of the forest and then taken to a warehouse where the sorting and packaging takes place. Sorting and packaging is primarily done by women. So that's making sure all the palms that come in have the quality that's required by the market. And this, one of the interesting things is they traditionally would discard 50 to 60% meet the market quality, or they got too hot in transport and spoiled. And then this is a market chain, from these production areas in Guatemala and Mexico. Continental Floral Greens, the major US importer, used to truck them to San Antonio, Texas. Now they're doing it by boat. The company changed hands. And then some palms also go by air to Europe and by air to Florida, depending on the wholesale company, the importer that they're working with. But I think one thing to mention, this is not like coffee where it can be around for a couple of months. These palms have to be to their final destination within about 2 weeks of when they're harvested. Otherwise, they will spoil. So that value chain, really that whole transport chain is very important. So the beginnings of this project was, we were asked by the North American Commission for Environmental Cooperation, which was set up by the North American Free Trade Agreement to look at the environmental impacts of trade between Mexico, US, and Canada. And we kind of added Guatemala in there because that's where we had connections. But their question was for us to do this market research was, can this palm be certified in some manner to guarantee sustainable production? The second question was, are there ways that we can work with the market to ensure that the harvesters, the communities, the individuals that harvest the palm generate more income from the whole process? So that was kind of what our research charge as we went into this. Why were they concerned? And again, part of that was these palms are found in important forest areas, biosphere reserves, and they're gathered by poor, marginalized local communities, which is often the case with these forest communities. There was, I guess, some documentation that the palm was being over-harvested in areas in both Guatemala and Mexico. And as I mentioned earlier, as these palms are harvested, taken in, being sent to market, they're discarding over 50% of them. And that was well documented on a regular basis. So that's palms that could stay in the forest, support the population in the forest that are not there. And again, as I mentioned, the palm harvesters didn't earn a lot from the harvest, but they're very dependent on the income. It's interesting because it is a year-round opportunity. It goes into the floral market, which uses it year-round for floral displays. It was a source of cash. And when you get to these isolated communities, there aren't a lot of opportunities for people to generate cash, which they need, to purchase their necessities. So although the timber generates a lot of income, the palm is a steady source of income throughout the year. If you need to have a little bit of income for buying school uniforms for your kids or whatever the case may be, you could harvest palms and generate that. And then the other thing that was happening is palm populations were being lost due to the conversion of forests to agriculture, livestock, and also fires escaping into the forest. If a fire goes through a Shate area, it takes about 10 years for it to recover. So we did market research in 2000, 2001, contacting local retailers and wholesalers here in Minnesota to kind of understand the market, and then nationwide surveys of wholesalers and retailers. But one of the things that came out of this was this opportunity to work with Christian congregations that use them for Palm Sunday. That was kind of a bump in the demand during the year. And the other thing about that was these congregations were working with Fair Trade Coffee. They were concerned about both social and environmental justice. So we did then research a survey of these congregations to gauge their interest. And it came back very positive in terms of their interest in supporting a sustainably harvested palm program. And they were seen to be equally interested in the environmental aspects as well as the social. We had a meeting in 2003 to bring some partners together from the private and public sector, from the churches, to kind of discuss this, government agencies as well. And out of that meeting, Sarah Ford from Lutheran World Relief kind of signed on and said, we're interested in working with this. So as a result of this, we had a pilot sale in 2005. So this was specifically for Palm Sunday, but parallel to this, Rainforest Alliance had asked us to set up a meeting with Continental Floral Greens, first in Guatemala, then in San Antonio, Texas, the headquarters of Continental, to talk about direct sales. And this is the whole middleman issue. which is very difficult. But in this case, the conversations with Continental started out a little rough. Guatemala had a bad reputation. They had a reputation for producing poor quality palms. So at first Continental said no, and then they said, okay, we'll try it on a pilot scale and see what happens and go from there. And they did, and it actually worked out well, and they continue to purchase directly from the communities. And then we had a pilot sale in 2005. That first year we sold 5,000 francs at 22 churches in 4 states. I worked with one of my graduate students. We delivered all the palms. I spent 2 days delivering palms, got home on Saturday at 3 a.m. in the morning and slept for a couple hours, and then got up and delivered the last box to a pastor in northern Minnesota who was concerned about not having palms for Palm Sunday. But so, I mean, that was our first experience. We worked with a local distributor, wholesaler, and in the second year, they took over the distribution. So we did the pilot, and they did that, and they used FedEx, a courier service, to deliver palms. So, you know, we grew a lot. The second year, 34 states, 80,000 francs, and then it increased rapidly between 2007 and 2012. Then starting in 2013 up until now, we've been right at about 1 million francs per year. And that, because of COVID, because congregations were not meeting at the church, at the structure, there were congregations, about more than half of them still bought palms and distributed them some way. But it was kind of in solidarity with these communities and because they wanted to contribute to the social and environmental justice. So the emphasis, of this work has been sustainable harvest, and there's research that has to be done to back that up whenever you work with a new product. The training for sustainable harvest was done, well, first by Continental, the company. So they told the communities what they needed in terms of quality for their markets. And then our partners in Mexico and Guatemala, Rainforest Alliance in Guatemala, and ProNatura, an environmental NGO in Mexico, trained the communities to do the gathering after there was this initial training by Continental Floral Greens. On the social justice issues, so as I mentioned, they get an additional 5 cents per palm frond gathered, and then that goes into the Palm Sunday sales, and that money is returned to the community. So at 1 million francs, we were returning $50,000 a year to these communities. They decide how to use it, and it's distributed kind of based on what they provided in terms of palms for the sales. So that's been a nice boost of income for these communities. And what they've basically done is turn this into scholarships for school kids, health centers, paying teachers, improving their the educational system. So it's gone into social products as well as supporting the business. The direct sales from community to importer to Continental Floral Greens. These palms used to be sorted and packaged outside of the communities. Now that's done in the community. So that's provided jobs that never existed in these relatively isolated communities and for women. And that's contributed to empowerment as well. And the social benefits that I mentioned that come from their use of that bonus payment for Palm Sunday. So the impacts, conservation, the communities are protecting the Maya Biosphere Reserve. There are satellite photos that show fires burning all around these concessions, not going in because the communities are protecting them. They actually have lower deforestation rates than national parks and protected areas that are outside of the concessions. The forest is sustainably managed and it's productive and it's providing for livelihoods. On the social livelihood scale, again, the employment and empowerment for women. There's been a whole, training of these communities supported by a lot of NGOs and international donors in enterprise development, running a business, making sure that is transparent and runs smoothly and that they're meeting the demands of the market. And then the investments in education and health that I already mentioned. And in terms of carbon, I mean, this is, it's a pretty impressive figure when you look at it because of the size of the area that is being protected. And this has been documented that over the next 30 years, they'll avoid the emission of 36 million tons of CO2 equivalent. So they're right now set up to sell credits into the market, but they're waiting for a better market price at this point. And the way things are going, it looks like that probably will happen. So kind of building off of this, some research opportunities, I want to move into that for Northeast India. And some of the background that I've talked a little bit about, the Northeast India tribal groups have various well-established governance structures. And as that report from Latin America pointed out, that is important. They have a large forest base under management and have been managing these areas for a long time. Mizoram, according to the government of India, is 78% forested. So again, referring back to Vice Chancellor Rao's comments, you've done a good job Mizoram has done a good job of the communities and the whole system of protecting those forests, which is an important carbon store for the world. But Northeast India as everywhere, is undergoing changes that can create opportunities for climate change mitigation, but also livelihood improvement. And that's where there could be some opportunities for some research. So some of the changing conditions that we need to respond to, and communities do as well, and they already are. The population is increasing. Climate change impacts are being noted in our conference in Nagaland. There were people that talked about changing the rice varieties they were using because of changes in climate. Farmers are in the market economy for the most part. So the market is a good driver of either sustainable or unsustainable managed land use management. So we want to facilitate, moving into those markets in a sustainable way. Changing aspirations of the youth, and this is true of everywhere we work, that we would like to create opportunities in rural areas to keep the youth there. And that might be building these enterprises that provide other opportunities for the younger generations. Changing land use and tenure, some of our work has shown there is this movement in Mizoram towards more sedentary agriculture, away from the Jumi. And I know there have been discussions about what the land tenure should be, who should be managing those areas. Improved infrastructure, market access, a lot of roads going in Mizoram. That these all create opportunities, but also often challenges. And you want to get it right, so you do have the sustainable land use that then translates into mitigating climate change and turning those issues around. Some of the things in our preliminary research is that the fallow periods are increasing in places. There was concern that they'd be shortened with growing population, but there are folks moving out of those areas. So in some communities, not all of them, you're actually seeing an increase in the fallow period. As I mentioned, farmers are transitioning to settled agriculture, and they're being very innovative about it, as they always are. Some jumes are being abandoned, although there is lack of good accessible data on juming, hydrology, and meteorology data that would be important as you look for solutions to some of these issues, or look for the opportunities to be exploited. As I mentioned, farmers innovate and look for new options. Oftentimes we can look to the farmers for options that could be promoted more broadly. But change is taking place. And as I said, which creates those opportunities, but also challenges. So some of those opportunities and constraints are new expanding markets. One of the things we've noted, in the U.S. with our work here, looking at markets for products from Latin America, is that the younger generations are more concerned about the environment, about social impacts. So they're demanding products that do not have a negative impact socially or environmentally, and ideally have a positive impact. So that creates opportunities for those sustainable options and facilitating those. Abandoned dunes can be managed and are planted as productive forests or agroforests. We can look at opportunities for value-added processing. You have communities in Missouri who were working with turmeric, actually had an enterprise going, creating the powder and then selling that in India. And so we can look at things like that, which again, add value to their whole sustenance system, and provide income and those other jobs as well. And so dune improvement linked to livelihood and ecosystem enhancement is another way to go. That might be converting to agroforestry systems, but looking for ways to maybe improve the dune where that is still practiced. But as we said earlier, information and access to information is often a constraint as we move forward on these. So some of the research that we look at as we're looking to address these constraints is the value chain research that informing the changes that we'd like to make, which is systematic assessment of the production, processing, and marketing of a product, better understanding of the cost, benefits, and timing in the value chain. How much does it cost to produce it, transport it? What's the best way to do that to generate the greatest benefits and support to those rural communities? And then identifying opportunities for improving the benefits and the value-added processing that can both create jobs, create better jobs, and greater income that then stays in the community. So we have a couple things that we've developed, as we've worked over the years in Guatemala. So this is just a very simple schematic looking at, how we look at market chains and how we identify products and then introduce those into the market. So identifying the potential products, really analyzing them for financial viability, understanding that value chain, determining what is a sustainable supply with non-timber forest products, very important, knowing how much you can harvest before you actually have a negative impact on the population, identifying attributes. And again, as I mentioned, markets now, even the companies, are looking for products that have the positive social and environmental impacts. And if you can show that to a potential market, that's often attractive and will make them more likely to purchase your product. And then the other part is, developing the local enterprises that are able to produce in the quantities and quality that are required by a certain market and get it to that market. And then just marketing these things in general. And as I mentioned earlier, there are applications for timber production, non-timber forest products, could be tourism and carbon markets, but it's a kind of a way to look at that. How do you develop these products and then get them placed in the market in a way that guarantees sustainable production and livelihood improvement? And then the other thing is, we really work across disciplines to do this. So looking at sustainable biophysical systems, agronomists, we need them for that. We need to understand the markets. So we need some economists that understand markets and do the research that supports the products that we would want to bring to market. Supportive policy is extremely important. In the US, the Farm Bill, the US National Farm Bill, often determines what gets planted on the ground. So to make a lot of these systems work, if you have supportive policy, it's just going to make it much easier. Landowner adoption, making sure that it's easy for landowners to adopt this, and that's a research topic. And then extension and outreach. how do you get out to the farmer? How do you present this to them and start these systems and then support your aggregation of products to get them to a market. Bringing these things together, integrating them, that leads us to the sustainable and productive landscapes. And they're all interlinked, but it's really important to pay attention to the different disciplinary aspects of this. This is just an example of our team. We have Dr. Carlin Ekman. She may be speaking later. Who's worked with social issues, gender and agroforestry. Dr. Andy Jenks, GIS, using it for management. He did some drone training in Missouri last time we were there. Joe Magner, working with hydrology, stream health. Paul Porter, agroecosystem analysis. Going back to the agronomy, Dr. Uday Singh, hydrometeorology and water resources monitoring for planning. And then Kyung-Soo Yu, a soil scientist. So we bring together these different disciplines to make this all work. Acknowledgements, we've had, as I mentioned, just an excellent relationship with Missouri University. We plan to keep that going. And also now, more recently with Kohima Science College in Nagaland, the government of Missouri, NLVP, PHED, and then the Irrigation and Water Resources Department. The Global Spotlight Program and One Health Initiative both provided funding for some of our work in Missouri. The One Health Initiative is FAO combined with the university. And then FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, New Delhi and Rome offices have been also helped us. So I guess with that, I'll end my presentation and ask you if you have any questions or take any questions that you have.
Dr. Casey, to kindly take over, please.
Right. Dean, thank you so much for your presentations. It's very insightful. And also there are some comments that it is very interesting, in the chat rooms and all. So here we have a few questions. Am I audible anyway?
Yeah, for me, yeah.
Okay. So I'll just go straight to the few questions that has been shared through this question and answer box. The first one is there any environmental impact on Guatemala with large-scale exodus from El Salvador? So that is the first question. I don't know, is it really related with the topic or not? So is there any environmental impact with large-scale exodus from El Salvador? That is the first one. And
yeah, well, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the second part of that. With what from El Salvador, Casey?
Excuse me.
yes,
Dr. Current,
Yeah.
you can see the question and answers at the bottom of your screen where you have the Q&A. The question and
sure.
answers are visible from there too.
yeah. You
Okay.
can directly
Thank
look
you.
at.
Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think there's certainly impacts as people move through Guatemala. Where we are working, it's a minimum impact. That's actually an excellent question, because one of the things that we are seeing in Guatemala, working in northern Guatemala, so it's a low population area, so that you don't have the same movement you would see in the other parts of Guatemala. It's not necessarily on that route as people move towards the US. But this work we're doing, it's really seen by USAID, the United States Agency for International Development, the Guatemalan government, as a way to keep people in their communities. So, it's just, when we talk about the roots of that migration, it's climate change, crime, but one of the roots is the, opportunities for people to generate income. So where we work, the crime is not a big issue. And a lot of the work that's going on there with timber, non-timber forest products, other enterprises, is contributing to livelihoods. It's keeping people in Guatemala. Generally those people, if they have a way that they can generate good income and not have to travel, they won't. I hope that answers the question. And I think this is, we are talking about expanding this work to other areas in Latin America, but it is one of the things that we do keep in mind, that, how do we offer opportunities that keep people in their countries and provide them viable options to support their livelihoods. So I'll move on to the second question, unless there was a follow-up to that. So the question was for sustainable NTFP and timber management. It is now the need of our to study the threshold regeneration potential of NTFPs, or timber yielding species, for each forest, that it can be decided how much NTFP to be collected and trees to be harvested, and how many to be left in the forest for sustainable utilization of forest by forest dwellers. Yeah, excellent comment. I mean, this has to be part of it. And the early work on the Nashate palm, that's really what they were doing. They were saying, we are harvesting, they grow naturally, but we need to understand how fast they generate. So they did come up with, for the different species, how many fronds can they harvest in what period of time, and still maintain that population which is able to regenerate. So, but it's a really good point, because there's a lot of NTFPs that are gathered, and if those markets demand more, we could have a serious problem with over harvesting and decimation of the population. So I agree wholeheartedly with that statement. Thank you.
I think, Dean, I may interrupt.
Yeah.
Since the question cannot be seen by other participants, I'll just
Okay. All right. Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's okay. The question I have with me here is, can the model of Guatemala is replicable in the context of Northeast?
I think so. I think we really see, that model is kind of a general model. So, yeah. And we started to do a little bit of this work. I hope to continue that. It is that process of identifying products, and then looking at, this whole issue of how much can you harvest without damaging the population. What are the markets looking for? How much supply do you need? So I would say definitely. We feel, obviously, we can't just translate it to India. It would have to be adapted in that process. But I think, looking to markets, how you, produce the products sustainably for those markets, and then placing them in the market, that process that we've developed, you could certainly use there.
Okay. I think that's for the direct question and answer. I think that is enough. But what I feel is, like, if anyone have a comment, not necessarily a direct questions, if you have any comments, including our honorable vice chancellors and other participants also, if you have any comments, like you just want to add up, maybe I think we can have 1 or 2, 3 minutes for that also. So let's invite for the participants to say anything, any comments on it.
There were a few more questions in the chat.
Yeah, you can also, let me just check it.
Oh, okay, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you see, Dean?
Yeah. One was, it says, palm sales and poverty reduction in Guatemala. Please give your comments. Yeah, right. And again, I think it's something that we've seen as very important, that they are getting more money into the economy. The bonus payment for Palm Sunday definitely has helped with that. And they developed social programs with, as I mentioned, health and education, which are often causes of poverty. So we have women that have worked in this project, that are putting their kids through school, through college. So it is, it's helping that, and it's giving money to women, and they use it in their household. So that helps with the whole poverty reduction. And, again, the health and education facilities.
Okay. So there is one interesting questions, Dean.
Yeah.
We may answer, because we may not take all the answer and questions because of time constraint, but I think one of these questions seems like very, interesting and appropriate. If the corporate are interested to marketize the forest product, then they usually employ trained personnel. Whether there is mechanism where tribal people can be educated, trained, and then engage in producing forest product. In this regard, which model is better for sustainable forest product and production and marketing? A standalone tribal group-led model of forest product and marketing, or a kind of tied up between the producer tribal groups with the corporate? So what is your comment on this?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. That we really, for our purposes, we work with private companies. Continental Floral Greens, the importer. We're working with a tree seed that there's a company in California that is a major importer in the U.S. But our kind of approach is that everyone brings something to the table. So, as we were working with Shati, we had to work with the private sector to move those palms from Guatemala to churches in a 2-week period. But, everybody we work with in the private sector brings their own innovations. But I think, that's a situation where, it's very important, but you want to be careful. You don't want the companies kind of overpowering the communities and taking advantage. But I think, what we're seeing for the most part is the companies, the consumers want to see the social and environmental impacts. So I would say a tie-up between the producer tribal groups with the companies, as long as it's very transparent and fair. Because again, we feel like, whenever we talk about these the positive changes we want to see, the market can be a very strong driver of those changes.
Okay, take one or two questions from here. The other one, which I think may be appropriate, is that from Assam, there's a chairman and CEO of Puhar Agro Producer Company Limited. So the question he has posted here is that the Assam also facing a climate change. So how do we collaborate with him, means you, to learn and adopt some of the sustainable practices in Assam? So that is the question. Is there any way to collaborate with you guys, folks in Minnesota and Assam, and to deal with the challenges that has been facing Assam? That is the question.
Yeah, a good question. I think this is a challenge that we're all facing. But looks like Dr. Ralti is typing an answer too. But yeah, we would be very interested in collaboration, and it'd just be a matter of probably setting up a time to maybe through our colleagues there in Missouri, set up a time to talk about this and kind of explore options. Because that's the challenge we're facing right now, is how do we, as we look at climate change, try and predict the direction. And I know this is something that Dr. Ralti has talked about quite a bit with us. How do we make that change in the most sustainable way possible, and that benefits environment and local livelihoods. But we'd be glad to talk and work together.
Okay, here is, I think this may be the last questions, even though there are some few questions, but let me just pick up one question. How were the local communities in Guatemala engaged in order for them to come up with a plan to enhance their income while following the principles of sustainability?
They're very well engaged. It's an interesting situation in Guatemala. They have received a lot of donor aid, a lot of funding. But so they've become, they're better trained for negotiation. There's a local NGO, Aquafolk, Association of Community Forests of Patan, that is very active lobbying the government, and their members are from the communities. All the people that we work with in Rainforest Alliance are from the region, from the communities. So, our approach has been, we're there to help. If they define a problem, we'll talk to them and see if there's something we can do as a university to address that issue. But I think, through these trainings, and again, they've received a lot of support. They're more active now in being part of those solutions and coming up with the questions they want us to answer.
Okay. I think the real last question is that who are benefit more, the producer or the middleman, as far as Guatemala context is concerned?
Yeah. Again, these are great questions. But I think in Guatemala, what has happened is, because there has been this direct sales from the communities to Continental Floral Greens, for example, we've eliminated the middlemen. In some cases, the middlemen have actually become part of the whole operation, working with the communities. So I would say, the communities definitely have. They have more bargaining power. A good indicator of that is they scold me if I get too involved when they're talking to the companies. I mean, they take more responsibility, and they are benefiting. Just to add to that, so the way they are benefiting, one is through those Palm Sunday sales where they get the bonus. They now, because they're working directly with the importer, they're negotiating better prices. And it's a negotiation. There's always a back and forth. So they've been able to increase the payments that go to the community. And there's jobs there in the sorting and packaging that never existed in the past. So it's definitely provided a lot of benefits to the communities. And I just want to add, going back to my comments about, or the question about working with companies, it's I think a win-win situation. So a lot of times, we just went through this company that imports the tree seed to make drinks in California. Their sales went up during COVID. So they need more supply. So now they're providing funding to the communities so that communities can store the seed, so they'll have a supply year round. But in that case, it helps the communities and it's helping the company. And that's what we'd like to see, that, everybody gets what they need, and in the end, our focus is improved livelihoods and the conservation.
Okay, and thanks to all the participants, even though there are some questions still left, but I think we may stop here about the answering question. Then Honorable Vice Chancellor may want to say a few words also, then I'll just hand over this tasks to Sir John or PTP, or then to Sir Honorable Vice Chancellors.
Thank you very much, Professor Dean Current, for your excellent presentation. All the participants, they're appreciating your lecture, and in chat box, they're actually sending messages. Your wonderful presentation and queries are also answered very well. I thank you very much on behalf of Mizoram University and on behalf of all the participants. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Yeah, so it is quite an honor for me to give the vote of thanks in the presence of our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor KRS Samba Sivarao. We thank you, sir, for your guidance towards planning for this webinar series. So Dr. Dean Current has been an integral part of the MOU between Mizoram University and the University of Minnesota, USA. He has been very active in our mutual collaboration between the two universities. In fact, had it not been COVID, he would have come up last year with some grad students here to fulfill some of their credits here in Mizoram University. So unfortunately, COVID has made that unthinkable now, but hopefully he will come up with yes, grad students or along with his other research scholars in the near future. And Professor Dean Karan, he has always answered to our demands from across the world over here. We have always, he has always answered us in our times of need. And today is your last working day of the week. I hope we did not push you too much with too many questions. There are so many questions still remaining, but due to the time constraint, we did not push you with all the questions. Even in the chat box, like our VC has mentioned, there is a number of questions in the chat box, very interesting ones. But I hope our participants can participants who are interested to contact Dean may contact Dr. Tanpui for his contact number or email. All right, so we thank all the participants for their
I think disconnected.
Lost him.
Okay.
I think John has disconnected. I think.
Yes, sir. Maybe I should continue, sir. Okay, we thank all the participants
Yes,
who have
yes.
made this program a success. Without you, our program would have been futile. We are very thankful to all of you. We are thankful to our Vice Chancellor, who has always been very, very much supportive, not only supportive, encouraging us to move forward. And we thank him for that. Dean, we thank you a lot for always being available to us when we request you to be a participant. And we hope our collaboration will continue, and it'll also lead to the progress of both universities in various aspects of research and academic works. Thank you so much, everyone, and good evening to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The recording has been posted in the website too. Oh, John is back. John, I completed for you.
yeah,
I hope
it's okay. It's all right. It's all
Yeah, you got disconnected.
all right. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. My network-
last minute interruption.
Yes, yes. Yeah, there is a very good participation. The chat box is also wishing Dr. Dean that it is a really wonderful presentation. Yes, Dean.
Thank you.
Thank you for the
He
wonderful
can
To all the
continue-
participants, there are 3 more lectures, series of lectures of Minnesota. People are going to come.
Yeah,
We'll
I-
inform you.
Yeah.
Please
Yes.
see our website regularly.
Okay. Good evening. Have a pleasant evening, everyone. And Dr. Dean, have a good day. Have a happy weekend.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for everything.
Give my
This has been
regards to
great.
Kim and the others.
I'll do that. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think she heard you.
Yes. Stay safe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. This has been
Yeah.
very good. Great questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Humphrey, could you send me the chat box comments and questions?
Yeah, I have taken snapshots of it, and I'll try to
Oh.
send it.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I think usually
Yeah.
they generate a text file, but I don't know. If you can, that's fine. But if not, that's
Oh, yeah,
fine.
yeah, it's there. I can do that too.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
it's a great presentation, Dean, really.
Good.
They
Thank you.
really appreciate.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Bye now.
Bye now. Have a good day.
Casey, please don't move out because I just have to take a copy of this.
All right, I'm waiting.
Yeah, because aron do ka mo to na mi ka. Kalok ang
Ati dakha umami.
answers ka o.
Ting lai te hi.
Ting ka zut la thing no o file. Dropbox. Ne.
Oh, do talk ko tama. Pangkan hiya ka nang lo thale chuna chhala.
John.
Achuak to ka ba she.
Any mo. Tumi o tung. Kita yanin ka safe thing nga lo ni chu.
Yung lo kha. Tunge ka sura sami.
Oh, it's a man can sort look or I wake a child or on a take it. Oh,
Ka lo lok mayang. A chan chu.
are relevant very out ka mo kan di pe John.
Ke po han lak sak tu ma thei tat lo wa. Katia copy ang lo wa ti zera ni lo chuan mo.
Oh. Raj, yeah, how do I get a list of the questions and the feedback? Yes, it's done. And he will request it for the questions and the feedback because he said it can be downloaded. I tried from this file, but it's not going. No, not the feedback from the participants, but the questions and in the chat box, the ones in the chat box and then in the Q&A. Oh, you can send me. Okay. Then that would be very nice because he wanted to have a list of the questions and all, since we could not tackle all the questions this time. Okay. Thank you so much then. Then we can close, no? Okay. Anything to do with the technical part, the recording case he has to close or anything else? Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Kesia. He'll be sending the question Q&A and the chat box thing. Aron mo nang makan end ka ime chuan adang ka chu ito vek ang ati
Kat close to me don sin.
mangcha